Lazarus es un concepto que se desarrolla y nace en el año 2004 con la intención de industrializar y acercar tecnologías muy complejas, muy privativas en ese momento, a través de la industrialización, a acercarlas al gran público, previendo la necesidad que existiría de servicios tecnológicos complejos a futuro. Se empezó con la parte de recuperación de datos, llegamos a ser el laboratorio de recuperación de datos con más volumen de Europa, llegando a dar cobertura a casi 14 millones de usuarios. Se ha ido integrando toda la parte de seguridad en torno a los ciclos de información, de la información contenida en los propios dispositivos, y actualmente una de las áreas que más crecen es precisamente el ciberriesgo, para garantizar la continuidad de negocio, y la parte de informática forense, porque se ha hecho absolutamente imprescindible poder analizar el contenido y la trayectoria histórica de la información y los hechos que representan en casi todos los entornos judiciales. Soy Manuel Huerta, soy el CEO y fundador de Lazarus Technology.
Every organization today is facing a myriad of threats, from malware to ransomware to data breaches. And businesses large and small are seeing this malicious activity materially impact their bottom lines. Organizations need to identify, track, and stop cyber threats rapidly, cutting through the noise to identify the threat, resolving it without delay. Flashpoint is the globally trusted leader in risk intelligence, with the analysts and technology to provide the most comprehensive coverage of threatening activity on the internet. We work with public and private organizations to get ahead of cybercriminals, immediately reducing their exposure, leading up to a 5 times ROI for businesses, and saving time and money across the board while protecting your reputation. Customers recommend us because we have better sources, better intelligence, driven by best-in-class analysts, bringing the intelligence community together for everyone's benefit. Our industry-leading software digs deep into the data to rapidly identify and remediate the most critical security risks. We're the best at what we do, giving your teams actionable data no matter what industry you're in. So whether you want to reduce fraud, increase your security team's productivity, or minimize data breaches, you can trust us to get the right data at the right time with the right context. Flashpoint, trusted experts, trusted partners, trusted intelligence. Is your company at risk? Flashpoint can help teams stay ahead of these threats. Sign up for a free trial today.
Bigu es una plataforma de ciberseguridad especializada en la detección proactiva de phishing, suplantación de identidad en redes sociales, exposición de datos y mucho, pero mucho más. Ofrece un monitoreo de activos digitales en la red superficial, Deep y Dark Web, apoyándose en procesos automatizados e inteligencia artificial, que ayuda a tomar decisiones proactivas y evitar así que se materialicen estafas, fraudes y distintos tipos de ataques. Cuenta con la capacidad de otorgar una visibilidad completa, generar reportes claros y concisos en forma ágil y a un solo clic de distancia. Brinda alertas personalizadas. De este modo, a través de distintos canales, recibirás las notificaciones que creas relevantes en el momento en que se detecten, asignando una criticidad determinada y reduciendo notablemente posibles falsos positivos. Bigu te puede ayudar a detectar y evitar, entre otros, filtración de datos sensibles, phishing, suplantación en redes sociales, credenciales expuestas, brechas de seguridad, subdominios e IPs desatendidas y o vulnerables. Además, contamos con analistas especializados, los cuales podrán administrar la plataforma y llevar adelante las recomendaciones necesarias. Be proactive, be safe, be good.
Hi all. We will have a special speaker. I will make the introduction in English because he will speak in English. También contaré, pues, nuestro siguiente invitado es miembro de la Fundación Shadowserver. Nos hará una presentación, pues, de todo lo que sería el panorama de cómo podríamos hacer los honeypots, sinkholes y representación de información de los diferentes países, tanto de España como de LATAM. Yo creo que es una charla súper interesante. Vamos a ver qué nos aporta, luego la dejaremos publicada también con subtítulos en español para todos los interesados. And yes, John, here we are. You could share your screen, but we'll do a short introduction. You joined Shadowserver 6 years ago, and you are a specialist in cybercrime investigation. You have a rich background in incident handling, training, and other collaboration between public and private sector. If you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and also the organization, would be great, and you could start with the presentation.
Thanks very much. Can you see my screen share?
No, I will. Yeah, you are sharing now.
You can see the keynote?
Yeah, sure. You could put it in full screen. Sure, good.
Thanks, Victor. Yeah, thank you very much for the invite. So yeah, Jon Flaherty. Just to introduce myself and tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm an ex-law enforcement officer from the UK. I started working in investigations and intelligence and operations and policy around the internet for about 20 years in law enforcement, working with governments, lobbying for better access to data during the seizure of evidence in investigations, liaising with lots of bodies online, lots of ISPs, regulators like ICANN, regional registries for IP allocation like RIPE, APNIC, AFRINIC, etc., to try and help law enforcement get better access to data in building a case against a suspect. That was for initially child abuse investigations. I then started to work a lot more in cybercrime investigations. And in 2016, I left the National Crime Agency in the UK and I joined Shadowserver. So I've been about 6 years in Shadowserver. We're still quite a small organization, not for profit. We are largely funded by the community to improve cybersecurity posture and situational awareness. And this presentation really concentrates on that, particularly with the title, A Spotlight on Spain and Latin America, where I give a summary. So within this presentation, I'll tell you about the data that Shadowserver collects, how we collect it, how we enrich the data, focusing specifically on, from our data sets, what we can see in terms of the overall threat picture for Spain and Latin America, and where I can globally as well. Hopefully we can draw some similarities and maybe some differences between the two. So yeah, hopefully there's something of interest in this presentation for everybody. My Spanish is terrible, so hopefully I'm speaking slowly. The majority of the presentation is very visual, very graphical. So hopefully you can follow. Okay, so Shadowserver in terms of the numbers and the data and how we collect it. We scan approximately 4 billion IP addresses, around 45 times a day. for what we call, we look for specifically exposed and potentially vulnerable services and misconfigured devices. We scan endpoints very passively. We don't really probe, we just scan different protocols and services. And around 139 million hosts respond daily. So that would be called our scan data. And we report these, the results of these scans out for free to network owners. For example, an internet service provider, a bank, or even an end user who provide us with their own directly owned network space. And should we see any activity from our scans for free, we then send that only to the owner of network space. Could be an IP address that they subscribe to us with, a bigger CIDR block, or an ASN, or even a domain name. So we have multiple reports in terms of our scans for that kind of service. And that forms part of our reports subscription. Aligned to that, we operate quite a large sinkhole infrastructure. And we sinkhole 4 to 5 million IP addresses per day across 400 to 500 different malware variants. So in that respect, we see a lot of victim IP addresses from our sinkholes that are infected with lots of different malware that we see. And again, for cybersecurity remediation, if that IP hits on an owner, a network owner who subscribes to our report service, they would receive a report telling them about the infection and who the victim is by IP address. Aligned to that, in terms of malware, we operate a honeypot sensor infrastructure, and we're always looking for new sensors to host. We host sensors globally. And we have about 1.5 billion samples in our malware repository. Some of the malware comes from our honeypots, where we log unsolicited traffic. We learn about the behavior of malware. We have partnerships with lots of antivirus companies, for example, where we obtain malware samples. And we have approximately 1.115 million unique malware samples, which we and growing, which we ingest every day into our sandboxes to improve malware detection and classification. So we have a very big malware repository there available to the subscriber. And we package all of that data up, the scans, the sinkholes, the honeypot infrastructure, to hopefully add value for free and tell you what's going on in your networks if we see something that maybe needs actioning. Currently, in terms of our subscriber base, we have 6,020 network owners subscribed, including 131 national CSERTs across 173 countries and territories that rely on our free daily reports. We also do some behind-the-scenes support for a lot of international law enforcement agencies. So we work on a lot of international operations, particularly when it involves taking down infrastructure, like a C2 botnet infrastructure. So lots of different data sets come together where we can provide assistance to you in your investigation. If you're law enforcement or if you're a network owner, we can try and better secure your network by identifying those exposed and misconfigured devices you may have, or users on your, if you're a provider, who have been infected with malware that we sinkhole. Just a brief summary in this slide. Shadowserver in Spain and Latin America. To date, since about 2004, we've been collecting data about all countries globally, providing those free reports to national certs and network owners. We have partnership with a lot of countries, with Spain, for example, lots of Latin America countries. We always do outreach. We do lots of training. We're always available to come to you or virtually train you in the use of our data. We attend FIRST conferences where we do training and lots of outreach. So we have a number of ISPs and corporations all the way through to the end user signed up to our reports. The URL at the bottom of the slide, you can visit for more information on what we do, what we collect, and how you can subscribe to us. So just taking the first data set, looking at the malware infections that we collect from our sinkhole infrastructure. The first slide looks at what we can see in terms of Latin America for 2022. If you go to the right of the slide, you can see the number of infections that we have by a daily average, by country volume. And we see some interesting statistics here. We see Brazil and Venezuela, who, in terms of our visibility, they have the most malware infections in Latin America. That's only from Shadowserver's view of malware. We only sinkhole the malware that we can see. So it's not definitive. The volume that we can see in the bubble diagram on the right, it doesn't mean that Brazil and Venezuela are bad at cybersecurity. It probably means that there's more IPv4 infrastructure in Brazil and Venezuela, perhaps, than other Latin America countries. So more consumer bases, more users of the internet in Brazil and Venezuela, for example, could equal more malware infections that we see. If we look at the diagram in the middle of the slide, this is a bubble diagram of what we call the top tags, the top malware infections by type that we see in Latin America. We see quite high volumes. The malware listed in the bubble diagram is very Android-centric. We can see lots of legacy malware infections that have been around for some time. They're still around. People are still infected by them. For example, you can see 97, nearly 98,000 Avalanche Andromeda infections. Avalanche is a Trojan that's been used in many phishing campaign, spam campaign, supported money mule campaigns, fraud, theft of victim data, illegal software downloads. And it was part of the Avalanche platform, the malware as a service platform. First seen in 2011. We helped to disrupt it with the assistance of the German law enforcement and German authorities in 2016. And that's why we can sinkhole the malware there. We took over the key C2 domains and broke the communication, therefore, between the cyber criminal and the victim by sinkholing the malware. So that's the methodology of how we came about to gain visibility of Avalanche Andromeda and lots of different Avalanche variants. Also on the bubble diagram, we can see Android Hummer. We sinkhole that. Again, Android malware. Some malware used to infect smartphones, turn off antivirus security, install unwanted apps, deny user permissions. We can see Down and Up, also known as Conficker, which has been around from memory since 2008. So a very a very old malware infection, which was a worm targeting Microsoft operating systems. And again, it's still about, there's so much more current malware, but we're still seeing legacy malware infections. It would be really nice to get them cleaned. And Sality, a peer-to-peer botnet deploying malware for spam, fraud and theft. Again, quite a few years in existence, but a reasonable amount of infections as well. So yeah, that paints the picture of what we see for malware infections to date in Latin America. Just moving to the next slide. We can now profile Spain. The bubble diagram is pretty similar, much lower volumes. For Spain, we sinkhole around 5.4 thousand IPs a day for infection counts. Again, very Android centric. We do have lots of legacy malware infections too. We've got downer.configure. We have FluBot, another Android malware, launching by stealth on people's phones, spread, I think, by text messages. Has the ability to turn off Google Play Protect and security products like that. So small volumes. To draw a comparison with Latin America, pretty similar. Again, Avalanche rears its ugly head as well there. On the next slide, we can draw a global comparison to Spain and Latin America. And I think you will agree it's pretty much the same diagram with the same offenders at the heart of it: Avalanche, Andromeda, and Android Hummer, and Configure. So again, a lot of similarities there globally. It's not just Spain and Latin America. We see a lot of Android malware, but globally as well. Moving on to honeypots. Just to reiterate, we have a honeypot sensor network. It's growing all the time. We get supported and funded by the European Union. And also we have a partnership with LACNIC in Latin America to deploy honeypots. And the benefit of honeypots for this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate web honeypots and IoT honeypots, is cybersecurity posture and situational awareness, whereby we deploy various honeypots globally, and we log unsolicited traffic to identify attack vectors, locations from where attacks originate from by IP address, the types of CVE, common vulnerable exploits that we see, and also the behavior of the malware that we see, and the collection of that we also add to our repository, again, which we run through our sandboxes to improve better overall malware detection and classification. So looking at this slide, on the top left, we have a lot of events, 373,000 plus events a day, taken from the 21st of July this year, for over 16,000 unique IPs that have attacked our honeypots from Latin America and Spain combined. If we look at the bar chart, overwhelmingly we have Panama and Brazil originating as the originating countries by IP for attacks. A lot of these IPs could be compromised. It doesn't necessarily mean the Panama and Brazilian citizens launching the attacks, but they're quite substantial in number. If we look at the second bar graph, we see some similarities in terms of the providers behind the attacks. we see Fly Servers, which is an ISP, I think, from Panama. And we also see over 100,000 hits, over 29,000 hits from Global Layer, and I think that's a Brazil ISP. So that mirrors and corroborates the country volumes that we can see. If you look at the pie chart, we have a pie chart showing the most popular CVEs that hit our honeypots. If you can see on the slide, the big chunk of green is CVE 2014-8361, which is probably our top exploit that attacks our honeypots across web and IoT honeypots, where we see an ongoing exploit against the manufacturer Realtek and the chip, the software development kit for the IoT chip, which allows for a wireless communication to be made to it to configure new client requests. And this exploit is open to abuse. It allows an attacker to gain access to that by remote code execution and the use of arbitrary code. And we estimate globally there's potentially hundreds of thousands of devices of Realtek SDKs at risk. So that's a real threat. We see that in large numbers. The second CVE of interest is CVE 2017-17215, which is a Hawaii router exploit from memory, again, leading to remote code execution. And thirdly, we also see, just one second, 2017-18368, an exploit involving a true online router exploit, allowing access to the remote system log, leading to remote code execution. So lots of CVEs, they're not necessarily new, but they're common in terms of volume hits to our honeypots, particularly a web honeypot, both across Latin America and Spain. The country volumes and the ISP volumes here are also in the highest, Latin America based. If we look at the next slide for IoT honeypots, a little bit different in terms of what we see. Again, I took the statistics from the 21st of July, 2022. A similar amount of events, over 3 million from over 45,000 unique IPs. Looking at the bar chart, we can see Brazil and Mexico here, followed by Spain as the highest IP attacks by country. Again, they could be compromised IPs being used by people from a different jurisdiction. The bottom right slide shows, I think, a Brazil and a Mexico ASN as the highest volume by attacks. The theory for us is we'd like all of those ISPs in that diagram to subscribe to our reports so we can send them all the results of the honeypots, and they can take a closer look at those IPs and see if they're malicious and have been compromised, and if so, they can clean them. So that's the benefit of that actionable information from our honeypots. To the top right of the slide, we can see some more CVEs. You can see lots of similar ones, but the biggest CVE from that day against our IoT honeypot was CVE 2018-13379. And that is an unpatched, an exploit against unpatched Fortinet VPN devices. That was first reported out in 2020 as a critical update. But the miscreants are still trying to exploit that. They're still looking for those devices online, and we see that in our honeypots. On the bottom left of the slide, we have a top 50 attempted passwords that the attackers are using to try and brute force the honeypot. And if you look at the passwords, they're pretty much self-explanatory. You can see some common phrases, common passwords there: admin, root, 1234, user, etc. So again, a real mix, similar events as web honeypots, and hopefully, if we can get those ISPs subscribed, some useful information and good intelligence for Latin America and Spain on what is currently attacking you in terms of CVEs, types of malware, and traffic analysis is available too. Okay, moving on to scans, also called accessible services. Another visual slide here that looks firstly at Latin America. We look at Latin America in terms of our scans by country and tag. What does that mean? We're looking, if you look at the map of Latin America on the right of the slide, our scans are showing the top tag per country, which means the top scan vector per country that we see on a daily basis that we think needs attention. So looking at Brazil and Argentina and Colombia and Venezuela, they all have the same top tag called CWMP, Customer WAN Management Protocol. If you look at Uruguay, they have a different top tag called DDoS middle box, and so on. We have Bolivia, where our NTP scans come top in Bolivia, where we see the most exposed instances and potentially misconfigured devices that need attention there. If we look at the bubble diagrams, top left, we can see Brazil per day with the most scan responses by IP address to our daily scans, 2.3 million, followed by Argentina and Venezuela and Colombia. Again, that probably means those countries in Latin America have the highest IPv4 infrastructure. So we see the most IPv4 endpoints responding to our scans. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lack of cybersecurity there. It's probably IPv4 volumes as the reason. And overall, if we collate the scans by top tag in the middle bubble diagram, we can see CWMP as the top tag. Customer WAN Management Protocol, it's a remote port that's open on your router that your ISP can use to remotely configure your router and give you software and security updates. That's, we think, potentially open to abuse in terms of an attacker gaining access to a router through that route and changing DNS settings for the theft of financial data and potentially compromising that router for use in a DDoS attack. So all the CWMP hits that we see, they do not mean that those devices are compromised. They're simply exposing a service we think should be made secure by the ISP. Yeah, they're open, so they could be subject to cybercrime exploitation. The second top tag overall is SSDP, Simple Search Discovery Protocol. a kind of network management function, discovery tool for universal plug and play devices and network asset management. Again, an open service which could be abused, that could lead to DDoS reflection attacks. 263,000 that day that we saw. Again, a big exposure in Latin America that could be reduced. For Bolivia, and as the top tag and quite high up overall, DDoS middle box scans come high. DDoS middle box is an attack where a firewall or a content filtering system could be abused, resulting in the reflection of TCP traffic to victim machines en masse. So a huge reflected distributed denial of service attacks from that. So we'd like to see them secured. That's a recent report. You can read more about that on our website. When we launched that report, we could see over 18 million devices exposed to DDoS middle box potential attack worldwide. So again, Latin America is no different. Globally, we see lots of these middle box attacks possible. And last but not least, a legacy authentication service, Telnet, unencrypted. Unfortunately, it's still around. It also scores quite highly and could be brute forced, resulting in devices being compromised for cybercrime exploitation as well. If we take the same scan data and look at Spain, we can see some similarities again. Some quite high volumes for Spain. On one day, we saw 327,000 responded hosts advertising an open CWMP service. FTP scores highly. SSL Poodle and MySQL scans come back in high volume. So CWMP, I explained. FTP, again, file transfer protocol, a service that could be open to DDoS reflection. SSL Poodle, an attack that where legacy encryption could be an SSL connections could be decrypted, which is a high risk scan that we see. MySQL, vulnerable open and accessible MySQL servers that could be compromised. Another new report where we saw initially over 3.6 million MySQL servers at risk worldwide. So again, in this case, Spain, we see 30,000 hosts. That isn't an aberration. It's not unique to Spain. Globally, especially where you have lots of IPv4 infrastructure, you're probably going to see a lot of SQL services hosted on those networks as well. But again, an abusable service that could be exploited by cybercrime. So Spain and Latin America, I would say, pretty similar in terms of scans. Possibly the same with honeypots and malware infections too. Moving on to some new stuff that we're bringing out. We have a new report called IoT device identification. We scan the internet on a rules-based queries for different devices by name, type, vendor, and look to see if we can map out IoT device populations that could be vulnerable. Again, not infected, but could be open, exposed, and at risk of exploitation from cybercrime. The URL in the bottom of the slide gives you more details on this particular report. If we take a look at figures and stats, on the 21st of July this year, we can see almost 250,000 IoT devices were scanned in Spain, and many more in Latin America. Top countries by volume include Brazil, Spain, Argentina, Venezuela, and Colombia. Just drilling a bit deeper into that, device identification by type. Nothing really interesting here. We can see lots of routers, firewalls and embedded systems, video systems, load balancers that we scan that are open. So thinking about DDoS Middlebox or CWMP, there's lots of routers, there's lots of firewalls, content filtering systems that might be abusable. And we send these reports, these population reports, predominantly to an ISP, just so they can have an asset check, an itinerary of what's on the network, and they can take a look potentially to see if they want to change the settings of a particular router or a firewall, and make use of our reports to better secure their networks. Looking at device vendor, some common names: Cisco, Huawei, Allegro, ZTE, Fortinet, MikroTik. MikroTik routers always score highly on our IoT scans. This is a router where we scan over 2 million MikroTik devices globally a day, representing quite a big attack surface. MikroTik routers were subject of a trust wave report in 2018, and it was stated they were being abused actively for cryptocurrency mining. They've also been noted in investigations, scoring highly for being compromised for C2, botnet traffic and tunneling. So again, to report that kind of population out to the community, we think is very useful for remediation, so that they can be better secured. And by device model, hundreds really, lots of unknown models. We're adding new rules to the scan every day. So we have 2 million unknown models, lots of Huawei gateway routers, pagers, FortiGate devices, and so on. And we get funded for these types of scans by the European Union. And this one is performed on behalf of a project called Variad. And you can, for further information, you can visit the URL shown on this slide. Just to conclude, some takeaways. Everything we provide is for free as a not-for-profit. There's no commercial buy-ins to subscribe to our reports. We don't discriminate in terms of how you use that data. We hope that you can act on it. And we believe a free baseline of cybersecurity is essential and can benefit everybody. So sign up to our daily feeds for more insight. They're free, come with no obligation. We're always open to partnership and collaboration on honeypots, sinkholing, and other projects that may benefit Spain and Latin America. Doesn't have to be if you're an ISP, if you're a bank and you want to collaborate with us, we're always open to that, for example. Always looking to expand report coverage for national certs and for those ASN operators in charge of the biggest network space. If you can support us in that kind of environment, please do, and help us to get those ISPs subscribed that don't currently. So thank you for your time. The last slide has a URL at the top of our new dashboard. We're launching our new dashboard to everybody for public use in August. Please take a note of the URL. You can have a play with that dashboard and you can play around with the data I've just described. So it will show you aggregated stats on scans, sinkhole malware infections, honeypot data, device ID, and more. If you want to have a look at that before August, you can email me. My email's on the slide, jono@shadowserver.org. And if you really want to look, I can give you the credentials for you to access that. So hopefully everything you've seen, if you're interested, you can have a play with that data. Okay, thanks very much for your time. Any questions?
Yeah, we will check the chat if we have any questions. If not, we will go to the next session. Please don't be shy. I will try to translate the question. If not, we could manage or redirect the question to Jon through our channels or Telegram group or LinkedIn. If you have any doubt, any request or of information or for collaboration, I think is very interesting, your work and from the Shadowserver Foundation. And I didn't see any question in the chat, but for sure I will write you also, because I think it's interesting also to know more about the work you are doing in Shadowserver, and also to get access to this report or to work closely to have or to explore any interaction. Yeah, we have one question. What about now location threat come from RSO height?
Could you repeat that? Oh,
yeah, I will put in the screen. What about unknown locations threats come from are so high?
I'm trying to understand that.
Pablo, if you could rephrase the question, maybe it's better to.
Could that be one of my slides? I think, Pablo, maybe you're referring to the bar graph. I think it has an unknown tab on it, maybe, where maybe somebody's hiding their IP. Possibly, could it be that?
Pablo, write the question in Spanish. I will try to translate. And any other question, feel free. Localizaciones, the statistical information regarding unknown locations that you show a high volume of high locations that are unknown. I'm not sure. Maybe if we could not get to the point, you could answer Pablo through.
Yeah, maybe tell me some more detail and I can write something back.
Okay, sure. Pablo, if you write me through Telegram or directly through Jon to his mail, it could be good to answer directly to get the question. Any other questions or answer those comments? He's asking why the volume of threats from unknown sites is higher than the ones that you have identified.
Trying to work out what he means by unknown.
I suppose I think it's good to get this question to by mail or by chat.
Yeah, maybe we can talk specific scans, and
okay.
We always have an IP of origin for every attack. We can see it's always known the IP and the country where it comes from. But behind that, it could be compromised in terms of somebody launching off somebody else's IP, if that might answer the question. Or
I think that there is another question. Why are unknown requests so big statistically? Maybe it's regarding more the kind of CVE or request, malicious request, more than only the location of the IP address.
It could be. I think maybe, if I understand right, maybe they're coming in from the countries with the biggest IPv4 infrastructure, is what they're kind of asking. But in terms of unknown, we can always attribute, is the word. We can always attribute an attack to a location. We always see the IP making the connection to the honeypot. So we do have the location.
Okay.
If that makes sense. If I misunderstood, just send me an email.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do, because we are short of time. I think we will forward the question. I will try to manage and forward the question people ask in the group and so on. If you could share also the presentation, we will share in our medias or platform to make it available for anyone who wants to ask or to contact directly. Okay.
No problem.
Thank you for your participation, Jon. More than happy to have you here, and so we will go to the next talk.
Cheers, Victor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.